Hello and welcome to Vitality Women Leading Audaciously. Today, my honored guest is Corinna Bellizzi. I hope I'm not bastardizing that.
You got it beautifully.
Oh, thank you. Really excited to have her on the show. She's an omega-3 expert, and she has developed this brand, Örlö, that I'm really interested in, plant-based omega-3s and much, much more. So welcome to the show. So glad to have you today.
Thank you for thank you so much for having me.
First and foremost, how come you're passionate about omega-3 fatty acids and Orlo?
Wow. Well, this journey started when I was in my teens. In my late teens, I was a competition mountain biker. And so I would, really just look for things that I could increase my performance with. And I'd read that omega 3s could help you in your recovery time. That was all I knew about it. So I started taking a lot of fish oil. I didn't understand quality at the time. I mean, we're talking late 90s, and this is a period in which most of what was available was essentially byproduct sludgy fish oil, not the best stuff, right? And so I would literally go on my training runs and my training cycling up a giant hill and come back to my home at the end of the day, and my jersey would literally smell like fish. I didn't know it at the time, but this was because my body was literally trying to get rid of the rancid oil through my skin is your largest organ, right? So years later, when I was already working within the natural products industry and I discovered that fish oil didn't have to be that way, it kind of just opened my mind and changed my world. I read the research. I kept finding out more great things about what omegas could do. I helped to put a fish oil giant on the map. They're called Nordic Naturals, and very large now. Over the course of 10 years, and then at the close of that 10 years, really was still in love with omega nutrition, but didn't really want to do it from fish anymore. And so my journey since then has been around really trying to create products and brands in the space that were ultimately much more responsible to our global resources and which wouldn't have to take from the oceans. And so that's been
Amazing.
my quest.
That's incredible. Are you still mountain biking, just out of curiosity?
I still have that same mountain bike, you wouldn't believe it. But
That's so cool.
life is short and I have so many different passions. I raced cars for a while. I ran marathons for a while. I competed in, what do you call it? 3-day eventing with horseback riding. So
Cool.
doing the hunter jumper thing and then also cross country. Cross
Wow.
country was my favorite.
Hmm.
Now I'm a mom of two young boys, trying to keep up with them and also running my business. So it's like
Love
a lot of
that.
the hobbies or the things that I might like to do with my free time,
Yeah.
they're gathering dust and a little rust.
Well, no, yeah, you know what? They're just, it's just a matter of time. My daughter just left home. She's 17. And it's like, all those things that I couldn't get to all those years, now I'm able to get to. So how old are the boys?
They're 4 and 7.
Oh, yeah.
So I
Oh,
just did
yeah.
everything in reverse, right? I focused so much on career first and having all the adventure that now, in my mid 40s, I'm just
That's
in the middle
exhausting.
of it all, right?
4-year-olds
When
are
many of my
exhausting.
friends are now in the empty nester space, I'm in
Yes.
the thick of it.
Yeah, well, you look incredible. And I do have to say that omega-3 fatty acids and DHA are essential for brain function, for healthy aging, for our skin,
All of it.
collagen, especially as a plant-based eater. It's also super essential. And people always come to me for nutrition advice. And I say, if you do one thing, you eat organic, right? But if you do one thing that's a little bit more sophisticated than that, is you watch your fat intake like a hawk. That doesn't mean don't eat fat. It just means be extremely vigilant about the sources of your fat. And we don't get enough omega-3 fatty acids in our lives. And so tell me something. I have this idea, and everyone's been saying, oh, salmon is the best fish oil. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me. Fish oil or omega-3 fatty acids in general, whether it's from a fish or from a plant, is very sensitive to heat and
Hmm.
light. So if you're going to put your salmon in an oven that's like 350 to 500 degrees, chances are the integrity of that omega-3 fatty acid is completely destroyed. Is that a wrong premise or a right premise, according to your expertise?
Well, I would say it's neither really, because if it's a fresh fish, if it's a really fresh fish and you've cooked it in your oven, most of that oil is actually staying within the flesh of the fish as you're cooking it. So it's not like it oxidizes the same way that a fish left out on the counter would for a long time.
Interesting.
So it's, bound with food. And that's what's different than if you were to take, let's say, a fish oil product, right? Because it's bound with food, because it's really nutrition, there's more things going on there than you or I could really measure with a litmus paper.
Got it.
And so I would say the salmon is fine, but the thing I worry about more with salmon is toxins, heavy
Sure.
metals,
Completely.
mercury, dioxins,
Yes.
furans, and most of it is now farmed.
I
Farmed
know.
fish is very problematic,
I
specifically when
know.
you're trying to do it in open ocean. And I mean, that would be like an entire podcast in its own.
Right. Like a cesspool of like grossness. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty horrifying. But people do not believe that plant-based omega-3 fatty acids are effective. They're
Which is
saying,
ridiculous
I
because
know.
the fish actually gets their EPA and their DHA from the algae they eat. They don't make it themselves. This is the thing that I was probably the most upset by on leaving the world of working directly with fish oil companies. We never talked about this. We never talked about the fact that algae was actually responsible for the EPA and DHA in the fish. And so I made the assumption, knowing a bit about human physiology and how we synthesize EPA and DHA, I made this assumption that the fish did it the same way, that they ate algae and the algae was just like flax oil, right? Flax oil is in this form called alpha linolenic acid. It's a precursor through 16 different steps. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but not by far, right? To how you actually get to the EPA and DHA. You have to use enzymes, including delta 5 desaturase, delta 6 desaturase. You have to stitch these things apart and then kind of put them back together, right? And so I made this assumption that that's what was happening with the fish. It wasn't true. Fish get their EPA and their DHA from the algae they eat. They bioaccumulate it. They also bioaccumulate toxins. And so if we're taking our fish from these carnivorous fish, the fish that are higher on the food chain, including tuna, including salmon, then guess what? We're bioaccumulating a lot of toxins with them too. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing to keep in mind. If fish get it from the algae they eat, why not just skip them altogether? So we can create an algae-based product that is just as good, even better, better absorption even than fish oil, if we do it really carefully and mindfully. And that's what essentially we've worked to do with Orlo Nutrition. So I can get more into that and why, but I mean, really, I just want to dispel that myth. It's
I
fish
appreciate it.
or they're not a better source.
Yeah, I even know a lot of vegans who are taking fish oil and because they just don't believe that the vegan sources are good. And let's face it, not all the vegan sources are good, and it's difficult to find. When I go to the grocery store, even sophisticated health food stores, there's only one, maybe two vegan DHA supplements, and so it's tricky. So thank goodness that Orlo exists. And by the way, folks, Orlo is a brand you can go online and find. It seems as though that's the best way to go. I don't know where we can find you otherwise, but maybe you can tell us more about that. But her packaging is so conscientious. She's using Myron glass, which is that, am I saying it correctly? Myron glass, the blue tinted glass that is that preserves.
But I honestly, it's a guess.
I'm sorry, it was breaking up a little bit. I don't know what you said.
Okay. Yeah, I think we had a little Zoom lag.
Could you repeat that?
I believe it's called Miron, but Miron Violet Glass, I don't know. Nobody's ever told me specifically how to pronounce it, but that's what
Right.
I've said.
Well, I've never, there's very few brands that have that much integrity to go to that length to preserve the integrity of the oil. So I guess what I'm just noticing about Orlo is the level of integrity at every step of the way, whether it's the packaging, the bottle, and of course the sourcing. So could you tell us a little bit more? I mean, were you instrumental in the formulation of Orlo and the process of extraction and whatnot?
Yeah, I was tapped on the shoulder by Isaac Berzin, who is the CTO and co-founder of maker of algae, essentially. Vaxa Technologies is a company he co-founded. And I already knew him from working in the industry. We'd collaborated in the past. He was basically taking algae growing from open pond indoors, but doing it in such a way that we could scale it. And by going indoors, he was essentially saying, look, we can control everything. We can still grow the same natural algae. We don't have to use pesticides. We don't have to use more fertilizer than we need. We can target and grow it, optimize it for its EPA, and ultimately produce an algae that has all the polar lipids, which means phospholipids and glycolipids. I know these sound weird, but Really, it just means that the EPA from it, the DHA from it, are going to be more absorbable than even fish oil, right? So 2 to 3 times more absorbable than fish or krill oil. And that's something we can confidently state, right? So he tapped me on the shoulder and said, help me bring this to market for consumers. Because Vaxa Technologies, that's the technology company, that's the grower. We have an aquaculture plant house in Iceland using only green energy. So we can confidently also state that this is the world's most sustainable omega-3. So it's really kind of a whole package that I was then tasked to say, okay, bring this to market for consumers. And so I did a few key things in the very beginning. I chose to work with a design firm that was exclusively comprised of women in San Francisco. I leaned in with them and said, look, we can do things differently from a packaging perspective. I know that there's this algae ink, actually ink that replaces petrochemicals made from algae, made from waste stream algae, for algae that is grown for nutrition, as a for example, right? So full circle. And it's black. It's only available in black. So why don't we lean into this black and white perspective? And then they came to the table and said, well, look at Miron Violet glass. It's black, right? Uh, Smells better than anything else will because it doesn't let light in. I mean, that's it, right? Like very pretty. You know, you can maybe get a blue hue if you hold it up to a bright light, but it's beyond cobalt, right? And that packaging itself preserves the integrity of the product better than other things. And so we just kind of looked for partners that could help us bring this together full circle. I went to Eco Enclose, which is a company out of Colorado. They print with algae ink on boxes. So we did craft, fully recycled, 100% post-consumer recycled shippers with algae ink. And then we even created t-shirts that we printed with our message and algae ink.
I
So
love
it
it.
just meant that every step of the way we were focused on how do we create something that we would say could bear this kind of seal of this is a sustainable brand, this is a regenerative brand, this is authentic, this is not just lip service. We're doing things differently.
Yeah, I love it. So, do you think everyone should be taking fish, not fish oil, omega-3 supplementation? Are you
I
of the
wish everyone would. I mean,
Yeah, because we can't really get enough. I mean, we're getting a lot of olive oil. We're getting a lot of avocados, olives, things like that. Like even, some people eat butter, right? So you're getting a lot of like the omega 6 and 9 in our diet in the West, but we're not
mhm.
really getting so much of the omega 3. And I think one of the reasons why the Asian cultures age so well is because they're eating a lot of omega 3 fatty acids and they're eating a lot of algae, which is simply just not part of our diet. I mean, I had algae for breakfast. I mean, I put algae in a lot of stuff that I consume, but I'm definitely the minority. And people usually look at me and they're like, "Oh my God, that's disgusting." But we need it now more
I
than
love it.
ever, especially for radiation protection and things like that. I don't know if you get that from the omega 3s, but I just know that algae is such a sacred, sacred food and one that's been honored throughout time in other cultures, except for ours. So tell me why you wish everybody would take omega 3 supplementation, especially in the algae form.
Yeah, well, every single cell in our bodies, every single cell uses omega-3. It's included in the cellular lipid bilayer of every cell membrane. And without enough of it, you won't eliminate toxins as well. You won't transmit nutrients as well. Your neurons won't fire as well. There's good reason that taking an omega-3 like EPA and DHA impacts your brain health. Half of the fat in your brain and eyes is made up of DHA. And we regenerate our cells throughout our life. You can literally say that every 7 years you become a new person.
Hmm.
So if we know this, if we know that we're continually regenerating, though slowly, and we're not getting enough omega-3, what happens? You have all sorts of health issues that can erupt. Omega-3s are protective of your DNA. They
Mm.
stimulate things called resolvins, which help to resolve inflammation. That doesn't mean they're anti-inflammatory. That's kind of a misnomer. It essentially is like something that helps your body return to homeostasis. What is homeostasis? It's balance.
Mm.
And if you're not in balance, if you're thrown out of whack, what happens? You get sick. And you can get sick in so many different ways. It could be declining eye health. It could be that your energy levels wane. It could be that you
Poor
forget where
sleep,
you put your
right?
keys.
Depression.
Anything.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And it could be anxiety. It could be depression. It could be your heart health.
Yeah.
Circulatory health is something that I mean, really, we've documented time and again, omega-3s really help with circulatory health. This is something you're in this life, and if you're not getting enough of this fat, and if you're getting plenty of the other, you're getting plenty omega-6, then you're out of whack. And when you're out of whack, then how can you live your healthiest? How can you have everything that you hope to have in this life? How can you even just stay with the kind of energy and engagement that you want to have with your family, with your friends? And so it's my belief that if everyone consumed enough omega-3 every day, that we
Mm.
would all live in a happier, healthier world. We might
Yeah,
even seek to create a healthier world because we'd be in a better, more mindful space.
I love it. Yeah, and you as a mom and entrepreneur know that firsthand. We need energy. We need
Right.
it
Well, I feed my
consistently.
kids, DHA too, and these soft gels are small enough that I give them to them.
Well, it's
And
one of the few clinically proven pills, so to say, that really does help
mhm,
ADHD, which is a diagnosis that's being thrown around a lot, including my daughter, who, they were trying to push Ritalin and all kinds of other drugs on to kind of help her. And I'm like, well, actually, the research is out, and I think most of America and even a lot of Europe, because I first heard about Nordic Naturals when I lived in Switzerland
mhm.
and I was attending a talk, and the correlation's been drawn for a long time. So I think everyone's sold that omega-3 fatty acids are important, that fish oil is important. And so this is a really necessary understanding that we can also get it from plants, from
Yeah,
algae in
we
particular.
can.
Is there astaxanthin in the product, or is that not? Is that part of it or not?
Algae naturally contains a small amount. It
Mhm.
wasn't significant enough that we chose to call it out on the label,
Mm,
because our product is really very simple. It is the algae strains combined, ultimately with soft gel material, very kind of straightforward, right?
love it. Yeah.
Contain the polar lipids to help with absorption, and that means that they don't, like if you pour an oil into a glass of water, it's going to float on the top, right?
Yes.
Well, if you were to take our capsules and squeeze them into a glass of water and stir it up a little bit, you're going to
Mhm.
see some beadlets form, but you're also going to see the water will turn green, right? And it turns green because the algae is green. The algae we grow is grown via photosynthesis, right? But you'll also notice that it kind of goes into the water. And this is part and parcel to the reason people don't experience that kind of burp back, and also the reason that it's highly absorbable into your tissues.
I
And
love that. That's
so,
amazing.
this just means that you're going to have a product that is 2 to 3 times more effective than a fish oil. So you can take less overall omega-3 and get the same impact. It also means if you have compromised digestion for any reason, that you're
Mhm.
going to be much more likely to be able to absorb this because your body doesn't have to do the extra work. And I know this is a sensitive subject, but we have a lot of leaky gut in this world.
Yeah, we
And,
do.
I'm not in the space of probiotics or enzymes. That's not a product that I commercialize, but I understand it well enough to understand that if your system's not operating functionally, then you're going to have a harder time getting the nutrition from even the supplements that you take.
Totally. Yeah,
So
things that are
part of
highly
that is
absorbable.
circumvented by being in the
Mhm.
polar lipid form. I
Mm.
would still counsel just about everybody, you have to eat a very wide variety of foods. When you have a diagnosis come forward from a doctor that says you have ADHD or you might have even autism, functional medicine doctors are having success by addressing the microbiome and
Yeah.
moving people from that diagnosis into just a normal state. Because if we're not absorbing the nutrition that we take in, then we're creating more problems.
Oh, yeah,
And so
completely.
we need to address gut health.
Yeah, you are not what you eat, you are what you absorb, actually. And that gut health is key. And eating
Right.
foods that your body and cells can absorb easily is key. And so we talk a lot about vitality on this show.
Hmm.
How do you create it? What is it? So the glow of vitality is directly correlated to light, and it is directly correlated to oxygen. And a lot of times when we eat fat, it can actually slow down the oxygen, and it can reduce the light. And in the form that you're describing, it sounds like it does the opposite of that. Actually, it brings more light because it's made from light. And,
Hmm.
and I talk a lot about nutrition for light body. And that's like intended to be a double entendre, because the
Hmm.
phytonutrients in the plants that we eat, whether it's in your omega-3 supplement, DHA, EPA supplement, or it's in the foods that you eat, it's important that we're constantly thinking about how we create and consume more light in our thoughts and our hearts and in our bellies.
That's such a beautiful way to look at it. I hadn't thought about it that way, but yes, because we're growing algae photosynthetically, it's not the same.
It's really not. And it's important that we think about that. I mean, I can't eat enough walnuts and hemp seeds to get the EPA and DHA that I
Well,
know
I
my
can't
body.
either. I will tell you, a handful of walnuts and it's like my mouth turns to chalk almost.
Mm,
So I love walnuts, but I can never really consume more than that. We have these natural limiters that are in place when we eat whole foods where people just get full on something. It doesn't mean you're completely full, but you're just done eating that thing.
yeah.
And so I think, it's like we need to just get smarter about how we're consuming food, the types of food we're consuming,
Mm.
and limiting things like just a reliance on baked goods and fried goods, and because they contain so many of the seed oils that can be problematic.
Yeah. Anything on a shelf, folks, has got some shelf stable oil in it, like soy oil, canola oil. Like these are not good for your body. They are,
So
I'm
much of
just,
it is hydrogenated. They
yeah.
even don't, yeah,
So we have to make our
it's
own
gross.
dressings. We have to make our own sauces. We have to, really take full responsibility. But as I age, I'm noticing how important this is, even more so for recovery from athletic, indulgences, and
Yeah.
but just for my hair, my skin. And I notice a big difference when I take a supplement that works really well. I have to admit, I have not tried it yet, but I'm really, really eager to try
Well, I will
it.
have to send you a box after this so you can share it with your community and enjoy it. So it'll be a 2 month supply. It's plenty for you to notice a difference for sure.
It's huge. Absorbability is so big, and I've just never heard of anything this innovative before in this space. And so I'm just really, really grateful. Where do you see this going for you and for Orlo in the next, 5 years or so?
Gosh, I think we're looking at the next 6 months and, the target is more immediate. But long term, what I see is that we are working to commercialize and to bring to market products from algae that can support human nutrition in every way.
I
We
love
know
it.
that the algae we grow has 19 essential amino acids, so it's comparable to beef in its profile. And so, if we can just make that super palatable and get through all the rigors of the FDA approvals for a new dietary ingredient, suddenly we've got something really credible, delicious, and also vegan that can support generations to come. The thing that
Wow.
we love about algae is it grows exponentially. It doubles its mass every 2 days. And so, because it doubles its mass every 2 days, you can continually kind of extract it. So, building the economies of scale in really is only a limit of our imaginations
Hmm.
because we can grow this indoors, we can grow it in a controlled environment, and we don't have to impact marine ecosystems at all. And
Mm.
so, these are the types of ventures that I see coming down the pike. I'm not sure exactly when they will happen, but we're
Right.
already in the space of omegas. We already grow spirulina for its immunity effect.
Sure,
So,
sure. I have friends who
the
grow
pro-
spirulina.
you
Yeah.
have,
Oh, you do. You do.
yeah.
Oh,
So
cool.
we grow spirulina because we can use the same technology to grow the spirulina. And then what we're seeing as an after effect is that the spirulina actually works so much better than a pond grown spirulina that it's kind of dynamite. So what we've done is we've created an immunity product that combines vitamin D3 with water soluble B vitamins. So it's in an aqueous solution. Even the D3 is water soluble in this case,
Hmm.
and spirulina. And so it's just a couple sprays in the mouth, and you support your immune system, which is pretty great.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's a brilliant product. Water soluble vitamin D3. That's rare. Vegans are not easily finding that, right? It's always in lanolin, which is of course extracted from animals. For those of you who
Yeah.
can't see her, Karina is a very beautiful woman who's just naturally beautiful. She is. For those of you who can't see her, and so she embodies vitality. That's for sure. And so how do you maintain your vitality being busy as a working mom and all the responsibilities that you carry?
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer in getting outdoors. I get outdoors every single morning. So I'll take my dog for a long little hike through my neighborhood.
Nice.
I live on a hill that's pretty steep, so it offers great exercise. And at the same time, I'm able to get into the redwoods at one of the furthest points of my hike. And we'll just sit there and kind of receive the beauty of nature, and then head on my walk on home. And I find that this gives me kind of this rejuvenated spirit, even if I have had a moment where I felt like a little lethargic or just a little tired starting the day. I am then suddenly refreshed. and able to start my day with a new renewed vigor, which is a great reset because, sometimes you have the chaos of the morning with the kids and everything else, and somebody might have forgotten their lunch or whatever the thing
Right.
is,
I know.
that you're just kind of jumping over these hurdles and getting out into that space is just one of my favorite moments because
Mm.
I have the luck of living in a beautiful environment and I don't take that for granted. I show it appreciation every single day.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that as we share, all the women on Vitality Podcast have shared, how they do it. And I find that this exercise seems to be a common theme for all of us. Getting out in nature, reconnecting. I know for me, it's the same because
Yeah, getting moving, you know?
yes, it's one of the reasons I live where I live as well, because it's just so magnificent.
Mhm.
It's really, really special. Any advice you have for the women who are listening, who might be struggling to maintain their vitality, and who maybe even also are looking for career change, or just, I don't know, anything come to you that you'd like to, that you maybe could share as words of inspiration for women out there listening?
Yeah, I think limiting thoughts are the enemy. I grew up thinking, for example, I'll never be able to run. I'll never run a mile in less than 9 minutes or something like that. And years later, when I allowed myself to say goodbye to these prior constructs and beliefs, I was running marathons. I even ran the Boston Marathon in 2009. Now, granted, I got the gift of bunions for all that street training, but the reality is I could do something different than what I had put in front of myself. And this limiting belief had kept me from realizing a goal that I didn't even know I had at the time. And so I just like to remind people that, you can think things like, oh, I'm in my mid 40s. I'm going to start experiencing menopause, as for example. I've chosen not to believe that. So far, I've had no experience like that. I've chosen to believe that I am not going to have hot flashes, leg cramps, any of it. I'm going to ease into my later years without those challenges. And so far, it's working. My mother went through early menopause, and I have yet to experience any symptoms at all. And so I'm attacking it with health. I'm looking at my nutrition every day.
Yeah.
I'm even going through the process of taking a test now to see if I have any allergy sensitivities, just because I want to know
Yes.
so I can fine tune my diet. Because I've noticed over the years I don't do as well with dairy, so I eliminated that, and I'm just looking at what else I can do to live my healthiest and my longest. That's me.
Amazing. I love that. We are more powerful than we realize in terms of creating our reality with our lives and our health. And I think we forget sometimes how those thoughts influence our reality. And I myself need to be more vigilant around the things I'm thinking and saying and believing.
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily that believing makes true, but I certainly think that when you believe that something's going to happen, you're more likely to push into that direction. And so if you move outside of that limiting belief and you say, it doesn't have to be this way,
Mhm.
I can be the master of my own destiny, I can be the master of my body, I can choose how I even age.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that's one of the beautiful things about children is they don't have that actually. And I've noticed as I've gotten older, I have these life experiences that have called, oh, well, that's not possible. Oh, well, that's not going to work. You know what I mean? It's so interesting when I listen to myself. I'm like, wait, who is that? Who is that person? Like, that's not me. So I appreciate
well,
the reminder. Thank
yeah,
you.
I think it's good. And also reminding your kids not to limit themselves.
Right. No,
They
I'm
can
good
do so
about that.
much.
Like my daughter thinks she can conquer the world. I mean, she's
Well,
good.
she can.
She will. She is. No, she's amazing. Anyway, thank you so much for being a guest on Vitality Women Leading Audaciously. Just been a delight to have you today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.